And we have to say goodbye, Ed, to a gentleman who's put on some long and meritorious service here at the radio station.
He's been in this business a very long time. We have said our goodbyes off the air, but we want to say our goodbyes on the air because if not for guys like Tom Franken, who is serving his final day here at WFAN, he makes our job a heck of a lot easier on the air. Tommy, you've had a lot of great memories in this business, huh?
I sure have. First, I want to say how proud I've been to work with the gang that works here now. There's a lot of great people here, and I think great people make a great radio station. And that's what makes FAN what it is. Over the years, I've worked with legends. The first man I ever worked with on WHN was Clem McCarthy.
No kidding. Is that right?
I was hired to work with him. And over the years, as you all know, I traveled with the Brooklyn Dodgers and with Red Barber during the early 50s. And I've had the privilege to see some of the classic games of all time, the magnificent game that in Philadelphia that the Dodgers won to get into the playoff with the Giants. That unfortunately is the last game of that playoff, which broke my heart. But I got I knew all the Dodger players, and I had some great times with them. I also worked the last game of the playoffs that the Knicks won. I worked with Marv Albert. That was the last time I worked with him.
Is that right?
And I was at a game that a hockey record was made that will never be broken. I will bet on that, anything. That was Moshenko's 3 goals in, 21 seconds?
21 seconds, I think, yeah.
I was standing downstairs waiting to do a post-game show, and I was standing like 25 yards away from the goal when that happened.
The ultimate pure hat trick.
Oh, yeah, nobody will ever beat that one.
Yeah.
And over the years, it's just been great. I've loved every minute of it. It's 45 years to be exact.
Well, that's a good run.
Tommy, we've loved having you here. We're going to miss you very much.
Indeed.
Thank
All the
you,
best,
I'll miss
Tom.
you.
God bless.
Tommy Franken, who's retiring today here at the Fan. And on that note, we're going to send it down to Bill Mazer right after Steve Levy. He'll be down at Mickey Mantle's. David, have a good day today.
Indeed.
And we'll do it again tomorrow.
Right
here.
You bet. 10 o'clock here at the Fan.
You got it. All right, 10 to 1. Thanks, folks. Thanks to Stevie and Joan, and we'll catch you tomorrow.
Sports Radio 66, WFAN.
WFAN, New York.
NBC Radio News.
Mike and the Van Talk. Sports Radio 66, WFAN.
Francessa on a Fan, 4:09 on a Thursday afternoon. Glad to have you aboard as we head towards 7. We'll get to the phone calls later. You've already heard from Howard Johnson. PJ Carlissimo will join us at 5:05. 5:40, Neil Austrian, who is now the president in a newly created position, president of the National Football League. And joining us right now, our special guest, man who is retiring after 45 years in the radio business and joins us now, and a tremendous guy I've gotten to know over the last couple of years and telling me old stories all the time, Tommy Franken. Tommy, first, congratulations, and I'm glad you're here.
Thank you, Mike.
You know, did you hear John from Sandy Hook say, tell Tom to write a book?
If my memory was better, I could write a couple of books, but unfortunately, it's not that good.
You know, let's just run down for a second. For the guys you've worked with, the famous sportscasters in the business that you've worked with. Go ahead.
The first one I worked with was Clem McCarthy.
Where was that?
That was at WHN. I did we used to do the feature race from Roosevelt Raceway, and I was actually hired to work that particular show.
Mm-hmm.
I worked as a disc jockey with he was disc jockey, not me, with Ted Using.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's the one. That's the guy. You know, and I've heard of him, Ted. That's the one Bill Mazer always talks about.
Yeah.
Bill Mazer always talks about the sound that Ted Using had.
Oh yeah, he had
very distinctive sound, right? Very proper.
Yes. Oddly enough, the station was sports-oriented, and the reason they hired Ted was because he was a disc jockey who also was known for doing sports.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to do Army football games for us and track meets from now and then.
You worked a little bit with Mel Allen.
Mel Allen, yeah, that was a funny story. The service teams, the police, fire department, sanitation, years ago used to have some great semi-pro teams. And they were playing a championship game, and I think it was at the Polo Grounds. And Mel Allen was on leave from the Army, and I was at WNYC at the time, and he broadcast the game for us. That was the one chance I got. He was quite young at that time, but I got a chance to work with Mel. I also at that time worked with a guy who was a pioneer hockey announcer. That was Bert Lee, who was actually the general manager of the station and the sportscaster.
And you also worked with, of course, Vin Scully.
Vin Scully.
The legendary Red Barber.
Yeah.
Well, before we even get to all these guys, talk a little bit about the change. I mean, we're sitting here now, 1991. How about just the change in the technology and the equipment from when you started and how it was compared to what we do now?
Well, the equipment was heavier. I can tell you that. Yes, I had to carry equipment that we had to have backup batteries in case we lost power.
Right.
The batteries were, because it was tube equipment, it wasn't solid state, and of course, one had to go to the polo grounds where I picked up the equipment in the dressing room, which was at one end of the polo grounds, and I had to walk all the way to the other end of it. By the time I was finished, it was lucky I had enough energy to do the game. But today it's the field is a little different. I think the equipment is different. It's there's more control equipment that makes it easier for the people that are operating it to keep it under control. We had to watch the meters and be very careful because, which was difficult because I'd be watching the game and I sort of learned to train my ears so that as the noise got louder, I could turn it down without looking at the meter, because who wanted to see the meter when the game was in front of me?
That's exactly right. And we'll talk about some of the great events and some of the great events that you've had a chance to work. Now, one guy who you still see who had a chance to work with you through the years joins us now, and that is Mr. Mazur. Hello, Bill.
Michael, how are you?
Good. Say hello to Tommy.
Hey, Tommy.
Yeah.
I may not have been the best announcer, but I'm the only guy that ever got you Dom Perignon and a steak at the Oak Room of the Plaza Hotel.
Is that true?
That's true.
Tell me, what's that story,
we used
Bill?
to do a program there,
right?
Just like the one at Medals.
And they used to
on
feed
WHN.
you. And you used to do it from the Oak Room at the Plaza?
Absolutely, and Tommy would be there, and we'd sit down like two upper crust gentry.
Yeah.
And order anything we wanted to order.
How long did that last, Bill?
Huh?
How long did that last?
That only lasted till Jack Sullivan saw the bill and cut it out.
Hey, Bill, you've spent a lot of time on that block then, you know that?
Oh, hey. Tommy, we never say goodbye, old buddy. Just keep the wind at your back. We'll meet again. I said goodbye to Finkel today and goodbye to you, but then I did that, God, what was it, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
So I figure we're going to get together again along the way. Have you told Mike about Connie Desmond and Red Barber?
Well, Bill, one thing, though, he did bring up, and as a guy I've heard you talk about many times, and he said he worked with them, and he was really a disc jockey, and he's talking about Ted Using, who I've heard you talk about many times.
Tommy and I have agreed he probably had the greatest voice of any guy that ever worked in sports. He was tremendous. Of course, Tommy knew him real well, better than I did, but Tommy worked with the best. Hey, when you work with Husing, when you work with Red Barber, how are you going to top that? There's no way that you can. Tommy, good luck, babe.
Thanks very much, Bill.
Take good care. Take care of yourself, Tommy.
I'll try. Thank you.
Michael, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Take care.
And Ted Using, do you think Ted Using had the best voice of all the guys that you ever worked with?
As a sports announcer, as a pure voice, yes.
Deep voice?
Deep voice.
Yeah.
A very... I don't know how to describe it. He was one of these people. His diction was noticeable. In other words,
very pronounced, huh?
Very pronounced, yeah. But Ted, as I say, I didn't do any sports with him. I just did I did, as a matter of fact. I did I think the Milrose games once we did, and I did that with Ted. But other than that, I did his disc jockey show and stuff like that.
So, not only on Manors on Central Park South, you guys used to go down to the Oak Room and eat lunch and get a show from the Oak Room at the Plaza. That's not too bad, huh?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I have a tape home of a show I did with Bill when Gil Hodges died. He did a show from there, and Jackie Robinson was on it. And I think Buddy Harrelson, Tom Seaver, and Gene Hermansky. And... That was it was a sad moment. It it was sad seeing Jack because by that time his health wasn't too good, and I hadn't seen him from years. Incidentally, there's a story that I'd like to tell about Jackie Robinson.
Yeah, go ahead.
When I left the station, I've always wanted to tell this on the air because it means so much to me. When I left the station, I'd be lying if I said that I was close friends with all the ball players. I was friendly with them, and I traveled with
How
them.
long did you do Dodger games?
About 4 years.
4 years?
Yeah, it was the great years, though, between 50 and 54.
No, the boys of summer.
Yep. As a matter of fact, I'm mentioned in that book, only not by name.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, tell me the Jackie Robinson story.
Okay. While I was traveling with the Dodgers, I was laid off. They cut back on the staff, and I was let go. And Jackie approached me one day on the bus, and he says he was working for NBC at the time, and he said, "Tommy, give me the name of somebody at NBC, and I'll talk to them." Now, I would not have imposed upon him to ask him. For him to come to me showed the class of the man. Jackie was a great man.
I mean, that's history. You watch history unfold there. I mean, that's an amazing thing, in this business, to ever get a chance to watch history unfold when you see a Jackie Robinson. And we're talking with Tommy Franken, who's a longtime engineer through all 5 ownerships of this station when it was MGM and HN and WFAN. Tommy, Bob Gelb contacted a lot of the guys today who you did work with, some of the big guys in the business, and they couldn't be here, but they did send their best, and we'll hear from the first one right now.
It seems like only yesterday that I first met Tommy Franken over at WHN Radio. I remember it so well because just the day before, my brothers Al and Steve were released simultaneously from Railway State Prison after doing their time, and I'll never forget how compassionate Tommy was about that. My thoughts of Tom, though, go back to my days at WHN over at 400 Park Avenue, and I recall, on a serious note, how supportive he was when I first was starting out. I loved hearing his stories of his days with the Brooklyn Dodgers when he worked with Red Barber and Vin Scully. And as one who grew up listening to Dodger baseball, I could listen to Tom's anecdotes for hours. He was so excited about his work, and that was so contagious. And what struck me was how encouraging he was when I first broke in. When you'd look to hear feedback concerning your broadcast, and those were my early days of handling pregame shows and the Knicks and the Rangers. I was living at the station at the time, but what always struck me about Tommy was that he was such a class individual, always had time for people. And when I reflect on those glorious days of starting out in this business, one of the first images in my mind is that of Tommy Franken, a great guy. Tom, best of luck with your future plans.
That, of course, Marv Albert. And I talked to Marv, Tom, on the phone today, and we were talking about you, and he said, you know what? He says, when I started out, Mike, he says, guys, some of the engineers, some of the older guys were tough with the young guys. They weren't that considerate. He said, but Tommy Franken would help you. If you didn't understand something, he'd help you along. And he said he was a great friend, and he was always nice, and he was always nice to all the young guys starting out. And he says, that's what I'll remember the most. And that's a nice tribute.
Yeah, it's nice to hear from Marv. I loved Marv very much. We were very good friends. As a matter of fact, the last game I did with Marv was the Knick game when the Knicks won the championship when Willis Reed
69-7, the 70 championship.
That was the last
in the
game.
Garden when Willis hit the first 2 jumpers. Game 7 against the Lakers.
That was the last game, and there's a book called Voices of Sport that Marv wrote one chapter of, and he talked about that game, and he mentions me in that the fact that we worked together. It was our last time working together and stuff, and that really touched me that he would think to write me, mention me in a book like that.
And that's the voice of Tommy Franken, longtime engineer who's retiring today, 45 years in the business. And here's another really big-time announcer. Tommy, we wanted to pay you a little tribute.
Tommy, this is Marty Glickman. It's been a while, hasn't it? I understand that you're hanging them up, and it's been a wonderful series of broadcasts that you and I did together over at Madison Square Garden, up at Yankee Stadium, even over at the old Polo Grounds, as I recall. And we just had some good years together and great events together. And I enjoyed working with you enormously, Tom. And whatever you're going to be doing next, Godspeed, my best wishes, and just the very best of everything for you. Take care, Tom.
Marty Glickman now. You work with Marty Glickman. Tell me a little Marty Glickman story.
Let's see. I can't think of a particular story. I used to do.
Well, when
basketball.
did you work with Marty? Nick Games?
I did Nick Games. We used to do shows in the studio, Sports Extra and things like that. Of course, Marty was, I guess he was sports director at that time.
You used to say, good like Needix, right?
Yeah. Oddly enough, when I was working with Marty, I was on the road because I used to do the Dodger games, and he was doing the pre and post game shows. And but of course, during the winter when I wasn't doing baseball, we'd work together. Mostly, I did with him. I did Nick Games with him, and do you remember Bud Palmer?
Mm-hmm. I remember Bud Palmer. Sure.
Bud Palmer. I was with. Well, this was with Marv. I did the first game that Bill Bradley played for the Knicks. I was at that game too. I was saying before that I think a lot of our listeners would envy my career because I got a chance to see so many great games, and I got paid for it.
It's unbelievable. And you talk about, you definitely saw a game that, was before I was born, but one that any baseball fan has heard about, and it's been ingrained in the consciousness of every baseball fan, and that is, of course, Brooklyn Dodgers, New York Giants, 1951.
Yeah. And before that, I'll never forget that game in Philadelphia.
Right.
With the one that Jackie Robinson starred in. That was one of the most exciting games I ever saw. And it was sad that it led to the eventual.
How about the shot heard around the world?
I remember it well. I was talking about it today. I have no idea what Red said at the end of that game because I think I was so stunned that I didn't even know he was talking.
You're a big Dodger fan.
Oh yeah. I got to know the guys, and
they talk about Edwards Field being such a special place, like the relationship between the fans and the players and everything. It really was something kind of magical, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was so small. It was so compact. People were always, it was so close together that and Dodger baseball. I mean, it was a tradition that it's a shame that it left us, but of course I wasn't with the team anymore when they left Brooklyn because I had left the station before that. But I had so many great relations. Funny story. George Schuber. I was very friendly with George when he was with the Dodgers.
Mm-hmm.
So some years ago, I was had occasion to see him at one of these these things where they have players to.
Right.
And I walked up to George and I said, George, I don't know if you remember me. I was Red Barber's engineer. And he looks at me puzzlingly and he says, no, there was a young kid was Red Barber's engineer. I said, George, I'm the kid.
But with your travels with the Dodgers, you talk about Red Barber, you also got to deal with another guy who's gone on and become one of the famous voices in America, and he also wanted to pay you a little tribute.
Hi, Tommy. This is Vin Scully out in Los Angeles, and I'm delighted to join some of your many friends in saluting you on your retirement. My gosh, I don't know where all the years went, but I do remember that in 41 years of broadcasting, you were as nice a human being as I have ever met in the business. That shy manner of yours, that great ability to cooperate and to maintain a delightful sense of humor are all part and parcel of the baggage that I carry from my days back in New York. I still don't understand where all the time went, but I send you much love, much wishes for a happy retirement, and please, as soon as possible, if you spot that the Dodgers are in town, come on by and say hello, because I sure would love to see you. God bless, Tommy.
You should have seen Tommy's face light up when he heard Vin's voice. I mean, your whole face just glowed when you heard Vin.
Vin has always been a very special friend. I think I was the first one to ever put him on the air in New York.
Really?
Yeah, because I was with the club before he was, and then he came and...
he talked about Tommy in an interview I heard about how hard a taskmaster Red Barber was in kind of training him. Did you see that take place and stuff? He said Red Barber really was a disciplinarian with him.
Yeah. Red was he was all business. I found him to be a nice man, but he once told me, he says, Tom, he says, if I do anything wrong, if I'm off mic or anything else, you tell me. If somebody else tells me, I'll get angry. And that's the way he was. He wanted the show. The show meant a lot to him. And it's just like he would never have a drink before a game. After a game, he'd have a couple of beers or something. He would never drink before a game because to him that was not something that was done.
How about back to Vin?
Then, well...
Did you tell right away that Vin Scully was going to... When you saw a young guy, you saw a young Marv Albert, you saw a young Vin Scully, did you look at those guys and say, boy, I can see these guys are going places?
Oh, sure. Vin had the talent from the beginning.
He's got such a melodious, rhythmic voice, such a great cadence for radio, you know?
And I think Vince would tell you that he learned a lot from Red. Red, I've never, for a man who never played baseball, there was never a man that ever announced baseball that was ever so into the game like Red Barber.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a treat to listen to him describe a game while you were watching it, because Red knew baseball as well as
the old professor.
Yeah.
You know when I got to listen to Red Barber when he was doing Yankee games in the early '60s. That's when I heard him.
Yeah.
And he was so cut and dried about the way he would do the game,
Yeah.
They used to call him the old professor in those days, and he'd do the games on TV and stuff. And that's where, as a kid, when I was watching the great Yankee teams of the early '60s, that's when I got to hear Red Barber.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that in those days he ever did the Dodgers.
Yeah, but Red, to me, Red was the best baseball announcer. Its style. There's a lot of things. His style was different than most people that you'll hear nowadays, but he was so into the game. Something would happen on the field, and the umpires would be talking to somebody, and a lot of announcers say, well, have to ask what was going on. Red would make a guess, and 9 times out of 10 he knew what it was. He knew what was happening on the field because he was so involved in the game that nothing happened on the field that he didn't really know what was happening.
This has turned into a Hall of Fame tribute, considering who wants to send their best wishes along, and here's another one.
Tom, this is Mel Allen.
Oh.
I want to take this occasion to wish you the fondest of farewells from the everyday tasks that accompany broadcasting. There's a lot of pressure that people don't realize that people like you undergo, and that people like you who don't always get to the forefront in being on the air, but who actually make it possible for those who are on the air to do as good a job as they possibly can. And without people like you, we never would have made it. And I know the good Lord will bless you with many fine years to come, and I hope you get to do some things that you haven't had time to do. This is a business where time is not your own. And I hope you get to do what you want to do and enjoy it and live a long and happy life. God bless you.
Mel Allen.
I'll tell you funny stories.
Go ahead.
He mentions pressure.
Right.
I was at Madison Square Garden doing a game with, I'm not sure it was with Marv or who it was, but Mel was doing the game on TV. And he had a show at that time on WFAN, and because of the time, they asked if we could feed his show to WOR. So I said to Mel, I said, stand by, and he's talking to somebody, and he's like, not ignoring me. I said, Mel, stand by, and I'm looking at the clock. It's time to go. He sat down just as it was time to go on the air. He wasn't worried, I was.
In dealing with all these legendary sportscasters, did you see a common thread in them, or did they all, there was obviously a great difference in just the personality of a Mel Allen from a Vin Scully, from a Red Barber, but did you see any kind of common thread in the way they acted, or preparation, professionalism, that kind of thing, or were they all just very different in their approach?
Different, but preparation is the thing. I think
they all worked hard.
They all worked hard. I think Marv, for instance, Marv was very young. When I first met him, what was he? When he started at WHN, he was 21 years old, I think. He worked hard. I have never seen anybody prepare like Marv does. And I've said many times, if they invented a new game and they wanted to broadcast it 2 days later, Marv would be an expert on it. Because he, that's the way he studies and applies himself to,
nice
to the
compliment.
game. Yeah, it's he's a hard worker, Marv, and his two brothers too. I worked with them, and they're very fine people. I met his father, who I liked very much. But another guy I worked with, who's sort of a legend, is Johnny Most.
Oh, Johnny, who was an all-time character and a guy who, if you ever listen to him do a Celtic game, just, the homer of all time. I mean, just screaming about the Celtics. When did you work with Johnny?
Well,
Johnny did Nick games for a while. Yeah.
I think Johnny almost started on WHN because, he was quite young, obviously before he went to Boston, because once he went there, he kind of got stuck.
Right.
But he did some Nick games with us, and I got to work with him at... and he's a very fine fellow. He's a nice man. I always was very fond of him.
But I know from talking to you just a couple of years I've been around here is baseball is your love, though. I mean, there's no question. I mean, I know you know what's going on in basketball and football, and we talk about that, but you love to talk about baseball. I mean, you've told me a million great old stories about the Dodgers and the Giants and the Yankees just in the last couple of years.
Yeah, they're all slipping my mind now, but they would.
Well, let's get this. Let's hear from this guy who I know is an old friend, and hey, just another all-time legend.
Tom, my last day doing play-by-play was considerably ahead of yours producing it. But knowing that this is a salute to you after your many, many years at WHN, this brings back so many good memories when the original Dodgers, the Brooklyn Dodgers, done Western Union Wire reports when the team was on the road. As the audience may or may not know, all of the out-of-town games in the big leagues were recreated from studios from Western Union reports until 1946. And in 1946, Larry McPhail put Mel Allen on the road with the Yankees, and then other broadcasts very soon thereafter had to go on the road too. The Brooklyn games became all live in the middle of 1948. But until those days, it was very interesting to be in the studio at WHN, and the Dodgers would be at St. Louis, Chicago, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, etc., and around. And we would do the recreations. And the way we did them was a little different than some other stations. Some of the fellows, as you know, tried to make believe that they were at the games, that they were doing them live, and they had sound effects. They'd hit us a little box for the sound of the bat on the ball, and they'd have a crowd effects record, etc. But ours were always, you might say, legitimate. We had the sound of the Morse code from the Western Union, the sound of the Western Union operator's typewriter, and as soon as a pitch came in, we would broadcast it. Our strength was that we wanted the audience to know that we were not at the ball game, that we were recreating, that we were not saying it for ourselves, and therefore when the wire went out or when a play got gobbled or something, the egg was not on our face. And as I sit here thinking about it, the wash of memory over all these years, it brings back the many years of your service and the contributions that you made to those days in radio. Those were the wonderful days in radio. Television diminished the impact, but still, nobody has been able to duplicate the value of television when it comes to doing the news. And so let me, as one of your former associates, thank you for the opportunity to work with you and to wish you well and to tell you that retirement is not at all bad. You'll now find time to do a lot of the things that you've always wanted to do. I know I have. Good luck.
Well, the one and only Red Barber, Tommy.
Yeah, that was a thrill. I've been wanting so much to get in touch with Red, just to drop him a note and say hello, because and tell him how many people I've so proudly told I used to be Red Barber's engineer. That meant so much to me.
The way people talk about Red Barber in the business, I mean, he's almost, as a play-by-play guy, they put him on his own plateau.
Yeah, he's just a legend. I mean, there's no other word for it.
How about those recreations, though? I mean, when you were in the studio, what was it like when you were getting the pitch-by-pitch account over Western Union and it went down?
That
Panic.
Yeah, Panic. Yeah, you had to be a great ad-libber. I guess it started to rain or something, but but those were the days. I mean, you'd hear the ticking of the the ticker. You'd actually hear it. As Red said, he wasn't trying to hide the fact it was. But a funny thing happened one time. Bert Lee, who I mentioned before, was a pioneer hockey announcer, used to do a program called Today's Baseball, which he would recreate the day's games. And he had a block, a wood block, and one of these little hammers, with the ball on the end. One day I'm doing the show, and there's a hit, and so he hits the thing, and suddenly he's in panic. He's waving to me, and I think, what's he want? So I went running in the studio. He waved for me to come in. The ball went flying off. And I had to go searching on the floor, otherwise that was the end of Today's Baseball.
It's amazing, those recreations. Huh?
Yeah,
they didn't send the guys on the road until 1946, huh? Did they all started following suit as soon as Mel Allen was sent on the road?
I don't know. I don't know. At that time, that was I remember some of the the recreated games, but I don't know if I was there right at that time. I do remember when we started to send a traveling engineer. Red became unhappy with some of the people that they were hiring locally to doing the games. So I remember I made a trip out to California. I was coming home, crossing the Mississippi River, and I said to myself, I wonder when I'll see this river again. And it turned out that about 2 weeks later, I was crossing that river because I got home from vacation, and they said, "Do you want to travel with the Dodgers?" And I said, "Who, me?" and the first trip was to St. Louis. Still remember the pitcher was Preacher Rowe, who lost 1-0, I think, in the ninth inning. I remember that game because it was the first one I was on the road with. But another story to show a class of a guy. Pee Wee Reese knew my name before I knew his. And the way that happened, I got on the train going to St. Louis, and I was kind of traveling with the statistician. He was kind of showing me around, and I was saying, "Who's that?" I'm a young guy. I'm traveling with the Major League Ball Club.
With the Brooklyn Dodgers, no less.
With a great ball club. And as I'm going down the train, this one fella goes by, and he says, "Hi, Tommy." And so I said to the statistician, I said, "Who was that?" He says, "Pee Wee Reese." Pee Wee Reese saw me get on the train, realized I was probably with the broadcast, and went to Red Bob and says, "What's the name of the new fella?" And he knew my name before I knew his, which really, he's a class guy, Pee Wee. I don't know if you've met him, but
I never have, no.
He's a real classmate. He, Carl Erskine, Gil was.
Who was your favorite Dodger?
Well, I was friendliest with George Schuber, but there was a lot in my life.
Who was your favorite player?
As a player?
Yeah, as a player.
As a player, probably Gil. I still think Gil,
solid, huh?
I still think Gil belongs in the Hall of Fame. I don't care numbers. Anybody that saw him play. I honestly feel that the thing that keeps him out is that one bad streak when he went 0 for 21 in the World Series. I think that is a shadow over him that they won't consider him.
They were having prayer devotions and stuff around town, huh?
Yeah,
trying to see if they could get him straightened out.
A funny story. But Gil was a gentleman from the word go. He was, quiet, because I remember that thing that happened with Cleon Jones, which showed he could be quiet but effective.
Well, let me hit, we'll talk a little more, Tommy, in a minute. With Tommy Franken here as he retires after 45 years. But let's hit NBC Radio News, latest from the Persian Gulf, right here at 440 on the Fan.
Sports Radio 66, WFAN, with Mike and the Man Dog.
All right, Francessa on the Fan, 445. Glad to have you aboard with the guest of honor, Tommy Franken, who is retiring from the Fan and has been here at this station through 5 owners and has been in this business 45 years, and who told me when he went up to the Hall of Fame and saw the broadcasters wing, he'd worked with 8 or 9 of the guys who were in there. I mean, you work with Ernie Harwell, Don Dumphy, Buck Cannello did the game in Spanish. I mean, there's not many people you didn't work with.
That's right.
mean, Tom, you really through these 45 years have gone through not only the glory days of the communications business, radio, the advent of TV especially, and the changes we've seen in sports, but think about the transition. Think about what sports is about now. Can you imagine thinking about going on that train that day and thinking about guys now talking about, I got to get $5 million a year?
They wouldn't associate with me. Millionaires don't.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Doc Gooden, $5 million or this or that. And the changes, I mean, just the changes in the communications business and in sports.
Yeah. You know, one thing, sometimes when people talk about the difference between players today and yesterday,
right?
I honestly think that the players years ago liked the game more than they do today. I think
more of a business now.
A
I think you're
lot
right.
of them played baseball because they loved the game, and it was nice that it paid them, but that wasn't what motivated them. They liked to play the game, I think. I also think that that there are some players play today that if it wasn't for the money wouldn't play.
I think you're probably right.
Because I remember a pitcher who he pitched the clinching game for them in 1952, Johnny Rutherford. Johnny Rutherford spent 1 year with the Dodgers, was 7-7, probably had a future with the Dodgers, and the next year gave up baseball because he wanted to become a doctor, and he did. So, you know, today, if somebody wants to become a doctor, they realize they can have a lot better chance of starting a practice if they first make the money and then become a doctor.
And when you think about it, you know, and as I said when we opened up, John from Sandy Hook wanted to call and said, hey, tell Tommy Franken to write a book. I mean, you could. You think about seeing Bradley's first game and seeing Jackie Robinson when he came up with the Dodgers and what was an enormously historic event, both in terms of sports and in terms of society. I mean, the way it changed things and just the whole evolution of what has gone on in not only the radio business but in sports in general. Heck, you have a wealth of stories and information that anyone would like to hear.
Yeah, I've thought of that. Sometimes I feel that maybe I'm, maybe I'm not that important. But
Tom, you just look at the tribute today. I mean, look at the guys who. I mean, this is like a who's who, a murderer's row in broadcasting who have called up, and Bob got on the phone to tape little things for you on this your last day after 45 years. What do you want to do? Do you have anything special you want to do?
No, I have a lot of things in my family. I'll have things to do to relax. I'll be able to do things I want to do.
We still want to see you out at Shea.
Oh yeah! As a matter of fact, I marked down all the senior citizens games. I'll be at them. Probably with 4 of my grandchildren, but at least I'll save money on me. But I want to particularly thank Bob Gelb.
He did a great job.
For him to do that, I love the guy.
Yeah, he did it. That was really nice. He put this together today, and it really was nice. And I tell you, anytime you can talk to a guy and sit here with a guy who's been in the business 45 years in this wacky business and dealt with Ernie Harwell and Clem McCarthy and Don Dunphy and Buck Cannell and Ted Using and Bert Lee and Johnny Most. And we heard from Bill Mazer, who you know forever. And we heard from Marv Albert and Marty Glickman and Vin Scully and Mel Allen and Red Barber. And Tommy, it's been our pleasure. It's been my pleasure to know you and to just talk to you about the things that we've talked to just the last couple of years. And this has been a great hour. I've really enjoyed it, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Thanks very much, Mike. And I want to say what a great pleasure was working with all the guys in the station. I really love you all, and I wish you all the best of luck. I'm going to miss you just terribly.
We'll miss you too, Tommy.
Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Mike.
Take care, Tommy.
1050 WFAN.
How about that?